All right, we're going to be reviewing Hacksaw Ridge. And I'm probably not going to get um, the most fanfare for this review because I'm going to let you know up front I didn't really think it was that great of a movie. And there's reasons why that's slightly controversial to say. We'll get into those in a minute. So this is a docudrama, a war film docudrama about a young man who really lived, and it's the story of Desmond T. Doss. And he served during the Battle of Okinawa, and he refuses to kill people because he's a conscientious objector. He signed up for the military as a conscientious objector, and he's the first man to in American history to win the Medal of Honor without firing a shot. So if you've seen the trailer, then you know the tagline, right? And you understand what the movie's kind of about. So it's the pacifist war film, and it's promotes themes of nonviolence and pacifism while also trying to promote the themes of heroism in the backdrop of war, which isn't easy to accomplish. So how well does it do that? You're going to have to watch and judge. There's a lot of different people who had a lot of different reactions on this one. Now, also, a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings because this guy really lived and he saved like 75 documented people. There's probably others that he helped collaterally save with his efforts, by keeping one other person alive. That person keeps someone else alive, it keeps someone else alive, right? So if you think of the butterfly effect of how many people this guy saved, it's really significant. And so it's in poor taste to dishonor a war hero by trying to crap all over this piece that is a tribute, and it's about honoring values, American values, and humanist values, and honoring the memory of this particular individual. So I don't want to dishonor anybody, and I don't want to dishonor anyone's values. So I'll be really careful about how I review this movie. Okay. So you have kind of the documented history of it. I'll tell you how they tell the story a little bit. The young man grows up in a somewhat rough household. So it's a fist fighting with his brother, a little physical abuse from the dad. Nothing extreme, not like it's a big theme of the film, but it makes him overly exposed to violence a couple times when he's young. And it turns this gentleman, this Desmond T. Doss, into a pacifist, even as a child. And he's developing these tendencies without realizing it. And then as he's growing older, he realizes he even wants to pursue the medical profession. So we're watching this young man kind of grow up. They segment his childhood in a couple, they split the first act into several segments of his childhood so that you can see his character development that's going to drive behaviors that are going to be contentious later on in the film. And they might drive you to separate yourself from him unless you knew a little bit more about his background, right? So they spend the time building the character and his adversity to violence. And by the time he is, gearing up to want to become a medical professional, and he meets a young girl who's a medical professional too, and she's a nurse, and they, of course, having a flame in the industry that you want to pursue makes you want to pursue it even more. So he's wanting to do that, but everybody's whipped up into this World War II sign-up fervor, right? The State Department did a really good job of using propaganda to create a nationalist movement that caused a ton of people to want to sign up and go and fight in World War II. People in their communities who were declared 4F, which basically means medically unfit to serve, if you didn't pass the physical to go and to boot camp and be able to participate in training and sign up. Well, people were so embarrassed about that, they killed themselves back then. I mean, that was a big deal. So this young man, he is not unlike a lot of other young men his age, and his brother, who signs up before him, and he signs up too. Now, this doesn't go unnoticed by their father, who was a war veteran himself, and it played by Hugo Weaving. I'll get into performances in a minute. I don't want to stop there right now, but the father as a character has some issues with that because he lost all of his friends and people that he loved in the war, and he's has post-traumatic stress disorder, and he is traumatized and depressed and an alcoholic and slightly abusive and trying to keep his shit together, but imbalanced because of his trauma that he suffered in war. Now, before anybody cared about those mental disabilities that we've now identified and taken care to acknowledge in society, people like that were largely overlooked, and they were just seen as, angry and not right and mean or whatever. And their dad's a veteran who suffered, and he doesn't want to see his son suffer. So he doesn't want them to sign up, but the sons, they sign up and they go to war. So here's the portion of the film where, if you have strong opinions about service, or if you have strong opinions about morals, and you aren't just kind of, I guess, dipping your toe in the moral pool, you've really decided what jacket is yours and you've put it on and you're wearing it throughout life. You may have issues with what the character decides to do next. So he joins boot camp and he signs up for the military, and he decides he's not going to that he is a conscientious objector, which is significant, and that he is a pacifist and doesn't want to use a firearm. He wants to be a medic. He wants to be on the battlefield. He wants to save lives, but he doesn't want to have to shoot anyone or protect any of his fellow men in to do it. And so the story makes you decide whether or not, for a while, he's making the decision based on sound moral, a high moral aptitude and sound reasoning that he's developed, that is, that as a set of core values that are driving his behavior, or is it cowardice? Is this character doing this because he simply was a little too traumatized by violence as a child, can't deal with it, and now has found a way to, the army has bureaucracy, and he's attempting to manipulate the bureaucracy to get out of stuff, right? So if that's the case, then he's not going to have a really easy time getting through this. Obviously his platoon sergeant or his drill instructor and his platoon leader isn't happy about it. His gentlemen that all signed up and know that their lives are going to be on the line, they also aren't happy about it. So what you have is, a guy who appears to be manipulating the system to, not have to pick up a gun because it's convenient for his, for the moral snow globe that he's built for himself that he wants to live inside. And you're kind of feeling like, man, this guy's not really cool. He's not doing what's right. You got a bunch of other guys who are going to go out. They're going to try to save each other. They're not just going to go shoot at a bunch of people and ignore each other. They're going to try and save each other too. And some of them are going to die trying. And it's going to take a gun to get you through this, you largely think. And so what they do a great job of at this point too is not really exposing the viewer or any of the characters to true violence. So what you're kind of seeing is just a lot of philosophical reasoning and bullshit talk, right? So once you get to Act 2, because this movie isn't really 3 acts, it's kind of a 2-act movie, where the first act is largely the development of the character and the development of his philosophies, and the second act is just the war film, where they release, and it really does become a war film almost instantly. A switch flips, and now you're in a war film. And we'll talk about Act 2 in a second, but we're not done, right? So the character does have, a little bit of trial by fire, in as much as where, he's being vetted by his fellow characters, he's being hazed by the gentlemen in his ranks and through his training, and they're all deciding whether or not, they like him, and they've all pretty much collectively decided they don't like him because he's not one of them. He's not willing to die for them and fight for them, and that's how they feel. So the character goes in, he actually gets court-martialed, and it gets trumped up. Nobody really wants this guy around. Nobody wants someone who's going to get him killed. But through happenstance, and through some of his father's old connections, he's able to basically get through a court-martial with his rights intact and as a conscientious objector, and he's able to deploy without a rifle and continue to train to be a medic. So he is deployed with his platoon, and he is deployed into battle. So begins Act Two. Essentially, Act Two happens, and it just smacks you in the face really fast because you've seen that he's got the try hard up until this point, and that he's given some good speeches, but is all this dodging of and all this work that he's done to not put a gun in his hands, is that really for benefit, or is that just going to get a bunch of people killed? And that was the true trial by fire, right? And so the character is dispatched, and I don't want to give away too much because I'm going to start getting into who dies and whatnot. But here we are, Act Two. The characters are essentially looking at this impossible battle that they have to fight. They have to climb up this sheer cliff face on a cargo net, and then once they get up there, you're essentially just lead flying through the air, bullets everywhere, and an enemy who's already buried in and holding the position. He shows up, of course, like most movies. The green guys get off the boat and they're, still fresh shaved, and they look like a soldier who's just had the wrapper taken off of him, and they just pulled out of the box, and hey, let me at him, Sarge, kind of a guys. And you're seeing the other guys who are there and have lost people already, and they're traumatized. And you see the value of the medic role is already elevated in camp. In the first night before they deploy, a couple of the guys come up to him, and no one will even talk to the new guys because nobody even cares. They pretty much see them all as cannon fodder that are going to die. So and everybody's shell shocked from witnessing what they just witnessed too, because you live your whole life in America in a relatively classical American upbringing, and then you're exposed to this level of violence that the film does do a great job of exposing you to and making you feel that first time shock as well. Well, you're going to be dealing with so much. You're going to be so shell shocked. You're going to be so traumatized. You're really going to be almost useless after your first encounter. So luckily, a couple of the medics come up to him and do talk to him and do take the time to try and at least break down a couple things to him. And they say that they give some pretty dismal statistics pretty quick. They say like, hey, you're one of only 3 of us. These 2 guys are covered in blood and rags. And they say it's we need to get together with you here and talk a little bit before we hit the hill. And so, they don't spend a bunch of time on that. It's just to let you feel the gravity of how needed he's going to be up there. And the fact that he doesn't have a gun and he's going into battle tomorrow, gives you that tension as a viewer. It just builds more tension because it's already bad, but now you're scared because you're looking up at this cliff thinking, how many guys am I going to lose? And so they get up top. And the second act of the film is largely, it kind of sucks because it feels like a montage. It feels like it should have been a 3-hour movie. I heard another reviewer say this somewhere. Another reviewer said this. They felt like this should have been a 3-hour movie, but it was cut down. And that the third act did feel like kind of like a save as many guys as you can in the fog of war montage. And they do a good job of creating that fog of war feeling where you're confused about which direction you're going, what's happening, where the enemy's going to come from next, and what to do, because there's so much chaos and violence around you. You are you're about to be victimized by it at any moment. So that those are fantastic feelings that they're able to generate, but largely the story just gets tossed up in the air like a deck of cards. 52 card pickup is kind of what it feels like there at the end. I will give it this though. I'm backing off of talking about Act Two a bunch more, and you can tell I basically stopped doing reveals, is because this is the build up of the story. I'm not spoiling anything for you in the build up. The real spoilers would all be in me telling you exactly who he saves, how he saves, and how that works out, which is all exactly what's going down in Act Two. It's nothing but how that works. I will give you a hint. The real gentleman who was the documented decorated war hero Desmond T. Doss was given that medal, and the Medal of Honor, and I don't know if he was also given a Purple Heart, but I'm sure he was probably a couple, because he was he was wounded by grenade fire, and he was wounded by sniper fire while he was saving these people. And the story is pretty amazing. I will give you another small hint that at one point a whole he's basically left up there all night on his own, and so this guy is trying to get people saved all throughout the night on his own. This isn't anything that you couldn't have surmised by watching the previews. The previews show you this a montage of events that are happening during the battle that reveal all this stuff. And so the movie does have an interesting resolution for the ending. I kind of didn't expect it. I thought they were going to omit some of the events to get to the end, but they go ahead and tie some of the historical events together to give you a more historically accurate ending for the film. So I'll leave that at that. Let's talk about Mel Gibson's director chops here, right? Let's talk about what he did right in this movie and maybe what went wrong a little bit. This absolutely harkens back to some of Mel's best work. Okay, if you've seen Apocalypto and you've seen that feel of how a story that's strongly focused around character development can switch to a tale of survival and a brutal tale of survival very quickly, then you're going to be familiar with the pacing of this story. Because just like Apocalypto, it feels like there's two acts. One, the full character development with different pacing, and the second is like full-on survival thriller story. I guess you would almost call it a war movie. It just takes place in a different time, right? He's being hunted. It's a little different. And so the pacing that Mel was able to achieve is not unlike some of his other work, and it works out really well. It's not epic in volume like, let's say, Braveheart was. For instance, everybody stuck out from the director of Braveheart, Braveheart is a saga, and it tries to follow more of a life and it's a snapshot of William Wallace's life, but it tries to follow a larger snapshot of his life in more detail than this will. This will feel more montaged than Braveheart. It'll feel even more montaged. Actually, no, it'll feel similar to Apocalypto, except for the second act, which does feel more montaged. And so Mel, I don't have any really major complaints other than I wish in editing he could have had another 45 minutes and they could have cut it in a way that would have benefited the film and the story a little bit more, and they would have gotten to build tension and maybe even build some of the other characters more. And so we'll get into performance. The young man, and I'll get his name for you real briefly, Andrew Garfield, who plays Desmond Doss, is pretty fantastic. He has a real genuine set of emotions that he can access on a dime. This guy can, when he has that puppy dog, I want to be hopeful, or I'm being hopeful and plucky and fighting against the odds. He does make you want to do that for the first half of the film. There is the portion where I disconnected from the character just because I was so frustrated with I wasn't sure whether he was truly going to end up being a heroic character or whether I was looking at a guy who was just, utilizing the bureaucracy of the military to his own benefit and kind of being like a little cheap coward, And so for a while there, I disconnected from the character only because I was wary of the character's motivations, but the actor didn't stop his excellent job of conveyance throughout the film. And he was a great choice, and Mel knew what he was doing when he cast his lead. He did a fantastic job. I will talk about a mistake. I don't know if it's a mistake in casting or if it's just I don't know how I feel about it right now because I love the guy, but I don't know if I loved him in this movie. Vince Vaughn. A lot of people are equating this to seeing Ross as the drill instructor in Band of Brothers, right? Remember, if everybody saw Ross in Band of Brothers, then you might feel like you're seeing Vince Vaughn in Hacksaw Ridge. David Schwimmer. I won't just, disrespect him by calling him Ross. His name's David Schwimmer. And when he played the drill sergeant in that movie, it did, for a lot of people, for the first portion, it just sucked him right out of it. But if you get through the first couple episodes and then you essentially rid yourself of the character. He only comes back one other time in the series. He does a great job of being unique and true to the prickishness of his character, I guess. And so he makes you believe he's a believable prick, and that transcends the stereotype and the the typecasting of his other role, that kind of bumbling idiot Ross thing. So this time Vince Vaughn, he definitely isn't doing Wedding Crashers, and he's not doing something that's as serious and contemplative as like True Detective, for instance. He's not going that direction with it either. But Vince Vaughn is a hard person to believe as a platoon leader. There is the line in this movie where he's like, he's jogging the bunch of these guys, and these guys are a bunch of really in shape, fit actors, who got these roles, and not all of them look like they were like these typecast 1940s weird mug looking guys. Even though Vince Vaughn is bordering on that now because he's kind of older and he's got the gut and he has a great throwback voice that makes you feel like he could have really talked or belonged in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So he's a great character actor for that time period, but that scene where I just mentioned, where he's jogging with all the gentlemen and he's supposed to be giving them a hard run because they've, not been training hard enough or whatever, and he says something like, "We're going to jog till I drop, boys," and he didn't get as in shape for the role as he should have to deliver that line, and it just, a lot of that stuff wasn't believable, so the whole character's almost not believable. You're like, what the fuck? You're gonna drop in 20 feet, dude. You're Vince Vaughn. You're a walking fucking heart attack. You're like 7 feet tall. Your knees and your lower back are all fucked up. You got a big giant gut, and you got saddlebags hanging off you. So what are you doing telling a bunch of young, fit, chopped up dudes you're gonna run them into the ground? It wasn't really working. That was like, but you know what? That was one of the only misutilized moments for Vince Vaughn where they tried to over sergeant him or over tough guy him. He does not try to come in Full Metal Jacket this thing and be like, or even Ross from Band of Brothers. He actually does like this more connectable, relatable 40s, character that is kind of like a tough uncle or something. He's not just like Mr. Hopper, military sergeant fucking guy, so because he's not doing that, it's more viable, and it did actually, it gets you to the finish line with him. So that one I had mixed feelings about, man. I really did. Vince Vaughn could have fucked that movie up really bad, I'll say that, and he didn't. The movie's just fine with Vince Vaughn in it. He actually, it isn't something that ends up detracting from the film, so I guess we call that a success. So why am I bitching? I'll stop. So those are a couple of the the standout character performances that have you kind of scratching your chin, maybe going, how's this going to work out? And I think you'll find that if you finish the film, you'll be pleasantly surprised. We will talk about the third performance, the one that's the most standout. Everything else is a little lackluster for me. There's nobody else I'm going to really concentrate on except for Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving, if you're used to seeing him as Elrond, I think he's the Elven King, or if you're used to seeing him as Agent Smith from the Matrix films, then stop right now and go back and watch Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. First of all, go back to his roots and watch Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, because if you want to see Hugo Weaving's range, you want to see his real fucking range, watch him in that film, and then watch him in The Matrix immediately afterward, and tell me he's not amazing. And now that he's one of your top, if he wasn't one of your top 5 favorite actors, you're gonna feel that way especially if you juxtapose those two films by watching them close to back to back. Maybe not back to back, but give it a week. Give it a week, rest, and then do it, because it might fuck up Agent Smith for you a little bit, and I don't want to do that. So Hugo Weaving's portrayal as the father of the two younger boys, and he even, they age him appropriately and have him come back in as the boys are older. So Hugo Weaving is there for about the entire first act, and even a portion, the beginning of the act. I would call it the first act. He is not there as really to be a part of Act 2. And Hugo Weaving's role as the traumatized war veteran of 2 sons that doesn't want to see them give their lives for this war. Not both of them. I mean, he can kind of cope with one, but when it's 2, it definitely triggers him, and sends him a little bit further on a downward spiral than he was, just as far as depression and drinking. And he did an amazing job of being a believable American, a war veteran who was in the grips of pain because he just saw the writing on the wall. He couldn't explain it to his 2 goddamn kids, because you know how kids are. They're just, sometimes They can't listen until they've failed, and until they've experienced it themselves, and until they have lost everything too. And so some things can be taught academically, and some things have to be taught experientially. And unfortunately, just like most children, the tough lesson that Hugo Weaving's character has to try and suck it up and learn is that he's got a couple kids that don't really learn academically. They learn experientially, and they want to go out and try. They want to go out and be. They want to go out and grow, because it's that time where the son usurps the father, and they each have to find their own and move out into the world. So that whole dynamic, everything that I'm talking about, it's a really subtle dynamic that sons and fathers have. That it's not. I said it's a subtle dynamic that sons and fathers have. It's a dynamic that sons and fathers have that's often misrepresented in film, and they do it well and subtly here, and without making it like this overt theme of the film where, the sons have to fight with the father to leave the house to go be themselves, which is, this too much of a theme of too many movies. They rely on that too much to be character motivation. This character is motivated by something else, and so it's ideology, philosophy, and religion, and that's what makes him who he is, and that's what makes him the hero that he is. Right. So this wasn't the easiest movie for me to review, because I hate feeling like I'm walking on eggshells, and I hate feeling like I'm going to offend somebody. I like saying whatever I want to say, and this movie it treads on sensitive enough issues that I didn't feel like just coming out and doing a scattershot review without being thoughtful first. And so maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this film is a war film that really does make you philosophically examine the merits of war and enough to make you redefine your own philosophies. And that's what war films should do. A good war film should make you think enough about the atrocity to redefine how you philosophically perceive war. And I guess that was some of the struggle, not only not wanting to offend, but some of the struggle of having some of my philosophies redefined, because you don't want to accept the pacifist war film. If you're like me, you want to go, well, why couldn't you have just done this, and why couldn't you do that, and how come, if you really were surmising all of your philosophy from a religious standpoint, then it doesn't really make sense. So there are a couple holes there, but overall, I think that the film was worth going and seeing. But I wouldn't go out and run out to see it in theater or anything. I'm gonna put that addendum. Yeah, I'm gonna put that in there. Don't go out and run out and see this film in theater unless you really like war films. Wait to see it at home. Wait to see it where you can enjoy it, and think about it by yourself. This is also the kind of film, I think, that if you got somebody crunching too much popcorn in the theater, or they're bugging the crap out of you, or just talking too much, or somebody else is laughing at the wrong spot or crying at spots, it might distract you from soaking in what is going to be a contemplative experience, because by the time you get done, you really have a lot of philosophy to mull over in your head, and you have to think about the tropes that you believe you traditionally want to see. If that's what you think of yourself as, like, I'm someone who likes my war movies violent. I like my war movies, gratuitous. I like my war movies to the max. Well, if you're one of those guys that likes like the Rambo franchises, this is going to be different, and you're going to have to be more cerebral at going into this to get more out of it at the end. So I'm going to give this movie a higher score than I thought I was going to give it. I actually came in here wanting to give it a lower score, but after discussing with you guys a little bit and kind of, rethinking it, I will give it an 8 out of 10 because it tries to push philosophical boundaries that other war films are willing. They push some of the same philosophy on you too, but they don't push the boundaries of it by trying to engage in the philosophy so much more, like this film does. This film engages in the in the philosophies of pacifism and nonviolence, and debates the merits of those much more so than a lot of other war films that just kind of the end justifies the means kind of a thing. Because we kill the bad guy, that was a good enough reason, is often the what you're left with. The defining message of the war film is, well, we had to do it, even though it was ugly. This one has, that's part of it. World War II. This isn't the first World War II movie that's ever been done, but it examines it from a slightly different angle. And so if you do want a war film with some different philosophies woven into the fabric of the tale, then watch this, because it's going to pleasantly surprise you. All right, guys. I hope you enjoy the review, and I hope everybody actually goes out and either downloads it on Amazon, buys it, off of a streaming service or whatever, or buys it for somebody for Christmas if they get it out by the holidays. It is a war film worth keeping in your library, if you do collect. All right, guys, this is Lee. This has been kind of a contemplative review. I know it's been a little bit different than some of my others, but this movie just took me there. So it was a little bit different of a movie, and that's why the review's this way today, guys. Anyways, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch up to you.